Hi there, Prairie Plant Girl here. Out in the garage because I picked up some begonia tubers and more ranunculus corms the other day and planted them up. So I've taken the ranunculus corms that I had already started and they're out in my greenhouse. They had sprouted, but these are the new ones sitting here waiting to sprout. And I have a video on that. If you haven't seen it, I'll put a link for you. But when I was planting up the begonia that I purchased, I thought, I have some in storage, and it's about that time of year where I should be getting my storage summer bulbs and tubers and things out of the cold storage and getting them potted up to pre-sprout inside. So I live in Saskatchewan, Canada, and it gets pretty cold here. We have a pretty short season. So I lift all my summer flowering corms, tubers, bulbs, and I store them inside in a cool space. And about the end of March is when I start taking them out to get them ready. So I have 3 crates right here of cannas and some dahlias, and these are my gladiolus bulbs. I'll just plant them right outside as soon as the ground is workable. And then I have some crocosmia, some acidanthera, various things over here. So just sitting up here on the snowblower are a couple more pots. So I have another dahlia, which is actually starting to sprout. I don't know, can you see that? Which one is this? This is the orange dreamsicle, so it's a very pretty dahlia. I can't wait to get that going. And I have, this is a cafe au lait, a pink cafe au lait. It's looking a little dried up. We'll see how it does. But I won't deal with those yet today. I want these begonias right here. So this is a double begonia. And I can't remember how many I actually have in here. So we're gonna take them inside into my plant room and we'll unearth them all here. But I can already see some sprouting, which there must be at least 2 in here because there's sprouts coming up that aren't attached to this. So we'll take them in and we'll have a look and see. I'll show you how I get them set up for pre-sprouting, and I'll show you the others that I purchased the other day. Okay, so we're back in my plant room here. You see lots of things going on the shelf behind me. And this is the package that I picked up just at the big box the other day. You know, I can't resist a few summer flowering bulbs. And this begonia, it was a pack of 6, and they're supposed to be a mixed double kind of pastel shades. So I'm excited to see those. I think that would be nice. And then I just took them and I just put them in these containers. So I have 2 containers of 3. And I just have these little plastic lids on just to try and hold some humidity in. So I'll show you what I did to get the corms to this point with the ones that I've stored from last year. Let's have a look at the corms that I stored from last year. So I already saw this one on top here, and it doesn't look like much right now. And it even seems just slightly squishy, but it's not like soft or mushy. And so in my experience, that's just fine. There's no mold, there's no like super soft spots. It's just dried out squishy. So I'll just set this in my tray here. I might need a bigger tray. I'm not sure how many I have in here, but there's 3 tags, which makes me think maybe I have 3 begonias. These were all a mixed double, I believe, of more like reds and yellows. There's this little one here that already had some nice sprouting on it. And I'm not sure, because I've never actually divided my begonias, but I'm guessing that I could split this like a potato tuber, because there's a sprout here and one over here. And I think that's what you would do, and then you would just leave it to let the dried edges cure for a day before you would put it in any sort of soil or growing medium of any kind. But like I said, I've never actually done that, so that's just my guess. Let's see if there's another one in here. It looks like I just had the 2 in there, so I do think one of the tubers when I pulled them out last year, because I got to it kind of late, I think one of them was really soft and not looking good when I had pulled them out of their planters, and maybe had gotten a touch of frost, and so I hadn't saved it. But the other 2 are just like this. If you're curious how I save these, I do have videos on how to lift your begonia tubers and store them for the winter, so I'll put a link to that as well. So that looks like this container I have here will be perfect. So I'm just gonna get some growing medium and we'll nestle them down in there, and I'll give you a look at how I do that. So I'll just pop these out for right now. This one just for comparison's sake, you can hopefully see that it's a little bit soft, a little bit squishy as well. But again, it's just a dried out squishy. It's not a rotten kind of squishy. And it has all sorts of sprouts coming on it. There's a little one back here, one here, one here. And that's fine if you see them starting to sprout in storage. This just means it's ready to get started and it's time to get it into some growing medium. This one here looks like it has the tiniest little sprout just starting right there. And there's some leftover vermiculite on top, so it's hard to, don't see anymore. So when you get something like this that there's maybe not some obvious sprouts on it, it can be hard to know what to do with it. You pull it out of your package, you know, usually they'll come in like some cedar shavings or maybe a little bit of peat moss or something if you purchase it in the package like I did the other 6. And you get this thing and you just think, what do I do with it? Now mine has a little tiny bit of stem attached to it, so that makes it a little more obvious, but usually they wouldn't even have that. So you just look at it and there's usually kind of a concave side that's kind of dipped down in the middle, and sometimes they're not as obvious. You can see this one looks almost flat compared to this. Hopefully you can see the difference there. And then the other side is usually then a little bit convex, or it's like kind of bumped up or rounded up at the bottom. So that's the bottom. Now they'll probably have roots coming from all angles and sides and things. So the old roots, they're old, they don't matter. They're not going to grow back. But usually, sometimes you can tell when you get a bulb out of the package or a corm which way to plant it by where the roots are. But with these, often the roots are coming from all directions, so you can't tell that. So you just have to look and do your best guess as to which part is the concave part, and that's the part that's the top. That's where the sprouts are going to come from. Just like this one here, where it has the tiniest little dip right there, and that's the top, and that's where the sprouts are coming from. You will get the occasional one off the side or something like that, but for the most part, that's how they're going to come, so you want to plant it this way. So that's what we'll do. I'm just going to get a little bit of my potting mix in here. This is just a mix of peat moss and perlite, and there's actually a little bit of vermiculite in here as well. And you can see I have just a really shallow dish. Begonias tend to prefer to be just a little bit on the root bound side of things, so they will, I find, start better if you have a small container like this. You could use small pots, like small peat pots or things if you wanted. One that's just slightly larger than the tuber. So you just want to get a container to put it in. And I like to use these little shallow dishes and just use these and just put a couple in, and I fill them as full as I can. So this dish is a little bit smaller than the ones that I used for 3 tubers because I just have 2 here. And that's, see how they're quite tight to the sides. There's a little bit of space between them, so if there's any rotting that does occur, they won't be touching each other and spreading it very quickly as long as I'm keeping an eye on it. And you can see how I just kind of nestled it down into that medium. And then I'm just going to kind of fill around them a little bit. And very lightly cover them on top. Just a little bit more right over here. And I'm just going to push down around them and just make sure that I don't have big air pockets. So you can see how much I was able to push that down. So I'm just going to add bit more of my potting mix in here just to fill in those low spots. And there's really, that's all I'm going to do. So when you're doing this now, remember you have that kind of low spot is the top. So you want to be careful that you're not getting a bunch of moisture built up in there and rotting out your little tuber. So I've just barely covered these with the potting mix, And as you saw on those corms, hopefully you could tell there was roots coming pretty much from every part of them. And so that's why I want to put just a little bit of the potting medium on top to help encourage lots of good, strong roots coming from anywhere that they want to develop on these. But the one thing that you want to be aware of then is that you don't want to rot these. See, I didn't even put them in a container with drainage because these are not going to get very much moisture at all. The medium that I used right now is just barely damp. I couldn't squeeze, if I grabbed a handful and just squeezed it as hard as I could, I wouldn't be able to even get a drop of moisture out of here. And that's what I want. And then if I do water them, I'm going to be very careful to just put a little dribble around the sides, or even just use a spray mister around the sides. But I find with something like this, because I don't want moisture collecting in those low spots, putting a little very fine dribble around the outside edges where I know it's not going to hit the top of the corm is actually best for me when doing that. I don't have a watering can in here, but I would just take, like if this was the spout of my watering can, and I would just direct the moisture just around the edges and just go real slow with a nozzle that's just gonna, like a spout, not a spray that's gonna spray across the whole thing. And that's all I do. Now this is just gonna go somewhere warm. You can give it light if you want right now, like this, because it has sprouts. I definitely want under the light because they'll want that light. And I'll take, just like I have on the others, and I'll put a little bit of a dome over it just to hold that humidity and moisture in, because we want to keep that moisture without having to continually add water, because then we have more chance of bringing rot and too much moisture in. So I find just holding the humidity around them is good. Nice and warm place. You don't need a heat mat or anything. Usually they'll sprout on their own. It can take a long time. It can take a few weeks, and I think I've had some even take up to a month to break their dormancy. So don't panic. If you're really concerned, you can just pull one up out of the soil and give it a little look. See if it has some roots developing on it, but more importantly, see if it's getting like soft and mushy, like rot, you know, kind of slimy, anything like that. And those you want to pull out and get rid of if they're sitting there like that. But otherwise, you just need to be patient and let it do its thing in a nice warm place. A little bit of light sometimes will help to encourage them to start throwing those shoots out, but it's not absolutely necessary at this point. And even just a bright spot in your house doesn't even have to be in front of a window or under a grow light, is going to be more than it was getting in its storage. And that's why you'll sometimes see them start to sprout in their packages in the stores, is just because they're exposed to that little bit of store lighting and it's just woken them up. So I'm going to take and put a couple of these, I'll just stick them all in these labels so that I have them ready when I go to plant these out, and I know which these are, that they're my saved corms here. And that's all there is to getting your begonias started. You don't want to put your begonias outside until your nighttime temperatures are well above freezing. Begonias are extremely frost tender. I would say you want to have at least 5 degrees, if not warmer, at night before you're putting them outside. And even then in a nice sheltered, a nice protected spot. Like if it's against the wall of your house, that's going to radiate some heat, or a protected little area where maybe it's going to trap and hold the daytime heat and sunshine, and then it'll kind of release that out over the nighttime. That can be okay and safe for them once it's above 5 degrees at night. If you have a more open location, like a hanging basket or something that you're wanting to put them that's really exposed, I would wait till it's getting closer to around that 10 degrees Celsius at night before I'm putting my begonias out. That can be hard to find here in Saskatchewan, Canada, until you're well into summer. So you might want to put them out and just be bringing them in and out just to be able to enjoy them a little bit sooner. That can take a while before you're getting temperatures like that, and you might wind up with some really nice, strong leaf growth and root growth and things going on in these little containers. So once these get pretty full and they're looking like they're drying out all the time, they have good growth, they have a good root system, you can take them out, pull them up, roots and all. And the roots are pretty fine, and they'll probably take a lot of soil with them. So just keep that soil with them, let them stay like that. And you can pot them up into a larger container or pot, but you don't want to get much bigger at a time. So say if they're in something like this where there's 2 bulbs, I'm probably just going to put them up into something like this size. It's just a little bit bigger than the space that they were getting in this container here. And begonias would be happiest if you have something that's shallow instead of a deep pot. Shallow pot would be better just to get them that little bit more tight root space that they prefer. It's not absolutely critical to give them that tight root space, but I do feel that they perform better that way because they are susceptible. They don't want to be drying out and they don't want to be too wet. So that smaller root space is just easier to manage the moisture levels with them more than anything else. Otherwise, they are they're a plant that prefers shade to part sun. You certainly don't want them in full scorching heat. Even though they want to be nowhere near frost, they also don't seem to be very happy if you get a lot of heat. I tend to put mine on the north side of my house, or I also have a little protected area by my front door that only gets a few hours, even though it's facing south, only gets a few hours of kind of late morning to early afternoon sun. It's a little bit hot. They can get a little droopy because that's some of the hotter sun of the day, but it's only for a few hours. And then they're back in full shade and they cool down again. So that is another spot that I find works well for them. So hopefully if you haven't tried begonias before, this will inspire you to pick up a couple. I paid $15 for 6 at Walmart the other day. And these are doubles. They're pretty nice looking. You can get all sorts of different kinds. Some have red leaves. You can get singles. You can get all sorts of different colors. So I don't think you can get purple or blue, but otherwise I think you can get pretty much every color of the rainbow going with your begonia. So there's something to fit most decor schemes. There are also a fibrous rooted begonia that you'll buy at your garden center more as a bedding plant, and they're a much smaller begonia with much tinier, more delicate flowers on them. And then there's your big, I believe they're called Rex begonias that are grown more for the colorful leaves and foliage. And those, again, would be treated differently and started differently. I've only ever purchased either the Rex or the fibrous at my garden centers, but these are very easy to start in your own home. And like you could see, you can store the bulbs and keep them over as long as they were healthy bulbs. When you dig them up in the fall, they should store very easily for you to replant and get going again in the spring. So if you've never tried begonias before, give these big, beautiful flowers a try and brighten up a shady area of your yard. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.